How did Russia quietly seize a forgotten empire in the heart of Central Asia, an empire so vast it stretched across deserts, mountains, and ancient cities, yet barely registers in most history books? In the 19th century, while European powers scrambled for Africa and India, Russia was carving out its own colossal domain, adding over 1 million square miles and millions of new subjects to its rule. But this wasn't just a story of armies and borders. It was a tale of betrayal, brutal battles, and a shadowy rivalry with Britain that nearly set the world on fire. Today, we're uncovering how Russia conquered Central Asia and why this hidden chapter still shapes the region's fate. But the story begins long before the first Russian soldier set foot on the steppe. Long before Russian ambitions reached the region, Central Asia was a crossroads of ancient power. Cities like Samarkand and Bukhara had thrived for centuries, their markets buzzing with traders from China, Persia, and beyond. The land bore the scars and splendor of conquerors, first the Mongols, whose thundering armies reshaped the steppe, then the Turks, who ruled with shifting alliances and fierce independence. By the 15th century, the region was a patchwork of Khanates and hordes, each vying for dominance. The Kazakh hordes roamed the northern plains, while the Khanates of Khiva, Kokand, and Bukhara controlled the south. Despite their rich history, these powers were divided, making them vulnerable to outsiders with bigger ambitions. But no one expected the storm that was about to arrive from the north. Russia's first real encounter with Central Asia was anything but triumphant. In 1717, under orders from Peter the Great, a Russian expedition marched boldly into the territory of Khiva, hoping to secure influence through force. But what seemed like a straightforward campaign quickly turned into a nightmare. The Kievan Khan welcomed the Russians with promises of peace, only to lure them into a deadly trap. Isolated and exhausted, the Russian forces were ambushed and nearly wiped out, their leader killed in the chaos. This brutal betrayal left a deep scar on Russian pride and set the stage for decades of simmering resentment. Yet, even after such a costly lesson, Russia's ambitions in Central Asia were far from over. After the disastrous Kievan campaign, Russia shifted tactics, opting for slow, calculated moves rather than open conquest. The Kazakh hordes, scattered across the northern steppes, became the first targets of Russian diplomacy and pressure. Some Kazakh leaders accepted Russian suzerainty, hoping for protection or advantage, while others resisted fiercely, sparking rebellions and border skirmishes. Trade flourished and faltered in cycles of uneasy peace and sudden violence. But when Russia tried to push deeper, nature itself became the enemy. In 1839, a grand military expedition set out to avenge past humiliations, only to be devastated by one of the harshest winters in memory. Thousands perished without a single major battle, proving that Central Asia's greatest defense was often its unforgiving landscape. Yet, Russia's appetite for expansion only grew stronger. By the 1850s, Russia's ambitions in Central Asia reignited with new urgency. The empire began building forts and seizing strategic cities along the Syr Darya River, determined to secure its southern frontier. But this was no longer just about local power now. The shadow of Britain loomed large. As the British expanded into India and Afghanistan, the two empires found themselves locked in a high-stakes rivalry known as the Great Game. Economic motives added fuel to the fire. The global cotton shortage, triggered by the American Civil War, made Central Asia's markets more valuable than ever. With imperial pride, economic interests, and international competition colliding, Russia's push into Central Asia was about to accelerate, and the region would never be the same. The pace of conquest quickened as Russian forces swept through Central Asia in the 1,860 seconds. The capture of Tashkent, one of the region's largest and wealthiest cities, sent shockwaves through the Khanates. Russian troops stormed city walls, fought brutal street battles, and raised their flag over new territories with relentless determination. Bukhara and Kokand, once powerful rivals, soon fell in rapid succession. Local resistance was met with overwhelming force massacres, and harsh reprisals became grim hallmarks of the campaign. Each victory tightened Russia's grip, forcing defeated rulers to pay tribute and accept Russian protection. The old order was collapsing, and with every fortress that fell, the map of Central Asia was being redrawn by Russian hands. But the fiercest resistance was yet to come. The Turkmen tribes of the Karakum Desert refused to surrender quietly. When Russian armies advanced on the fortress of Geopolitics, the Turkmen mounted a desperate last stand, gathering both warriors and civilians behind its walls. The siege was brutal. Russian artillery pounded the fortress, but the defenders held out against impossible odds. When the walls finally fell, the aftermath was devastating. Thousands were killed in a matter of days, and the Turkmen resistance was crushed with shocking ferocity. The fall of Geopolitics marked the end of organized opposition in Central Asia. Yet, the memory of this bloody siege would linger, a symbol of both defiance and the heavy price paid for resisting the Russian advance. But even as the dust settled, a new crisis was brewing on the empire's southern border. As Russia's empire pressed south, it collided head-on with British interests in Afghanistan, bringing the two superpowers to the brink of war. The flashpoint came in 1885, when Russian and Afghan troops clashed at Ponda, a disputed border region. For days, the world held its breath as London and St. Petersburg exchanged threats, and rumors of a global conflict swirled. The Great Game had never felt so dangerous. But at the last moment, diplomacy prevailed. The Afghan ruler urged both sides to negotiate, and a tense agreement was reached. Russia would halt its advance at Kushka while Britain recognized the new border. The standoff ended without war, but the boundaries drawn in those frantic days would shape Central Asia and its rivalries for generations to come. For decades after the final border was drawn, Central Asia remained firmly under Russian and later Soviet control. The region's ancient cities and diverse peoples were woven into the fabric of a vast empire, their destinies shaped by decisions made far away in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Even after the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, the legacy of Russian rule lingered. Economic ties, political influence, and cultural connections still bind Central Asia to its former conqueror, even as new nations assert their independence and identity. The story of Russia's conquest is more than a tale of battles and borders. It's a reminder of how forgotten empires can cast long shadows. Was this the dawn of a new era, or simply the last gasp of old imperial ambitions? The answer still echoes across the steppes today.